All right, so we're here with Leslie Chung. Do you wanna just introduce yourself? So, because I feel like you've done so much, and there's just so much to say. Do you want to introduce yourself, like where you're at now, and like what are you
Sure.
really up to?
Hi everyone. I'm Leslie Chung, and I'm a visual effects supervisor at Crafty Apes VFX here in New York City. Um, let's see. During COVID, it kind of landed right around when one of my bigger shows had turned over already. So most of my life and work from home has been working on season 3 of Star Trek Discovery, and upcoming show is season 3 of Manifest, which is on I think NBC,
Awesome.
I believe. Yeah, so I went to school in New York City for visual effects at SVA, and um, started off after that at PsyOp, and 12 years later I've made my way here to Crafty. Kind of hopped around doing both the freelance life and the staff life. Um, Several times, I think, throughout those years. I've been staff about 3 or 4 times, and then in between each of those had a good run of freelance work around various shops in New York City.
Yeah. So, all right, let's just get. So we're here. We're gonna try to talk about COVID. Um, so my first big question, specifically for you, what is like kind of the biggest shock with COVID? Because you know obviously when COVID happened, it's kind of unprecedented. I don't think anybody really in post production understood how to tackle it when it first came about. What was the biggest surprise to you when it happened? Specifically with your experience, because you've been, I feel like you've been in every scenario. So what was the
Sure, I
biggest?
guess the biggest surprise that related, I guess, directly to visual effects would have been how hard it is to collaborate without physically being near each other. There's a lot that's easy and fine, and really didn't make a blip on it, since like video calling is so wonderful, and we can do plenty of screen sharing even within our like secure desktops, to look at the same thing that our artists are looking at. But somehow I think the camaraderie and the ability to really trade insights and just off the cuff problem solving is what really took a little bit of a hit. So certain creative effects were a little bit harder to convey, or a little bit slower in making sure that it was on the right track, simply because you can't just walk over to somebody's desk, tap them on the shoulder, and be like, "Hey, so how's it going?" Everything becomes a little bit too deliberate now. When you're checking in with somebody about their work, it's a check-in. It's a video call. We have to tell the other guys. It's not like, hey, like come check out what Adam did.
Yeah, it's like I feel like everything's logistics now, right?
It is.
Basic,
Everything
basic communication.
is logistical. So
Yeah.
it all has to go through a process. And little things too, like just again passing another person's desk and him sharing that maybe with the artist next to him, or somebody realizing that they might have similar shots or similar techniques that maybe the supervisors have missed, just because we're always on the broader strokes of an entire show.
Hmm.
That I think was the hardest thing to simulate. So for everyone in management, and even something that we started asking of all the artists, was to be a bit more diligent about looking at the bigger picture, and trying to be a little bit more diligent about being aware of what everybody else might be doing and when to speak up.
What was the first when you knew that code was gonna come about? What was kind of the biggest fear you had? I mean, we know now kind of how things played out, I guess. But before any of that, what was the biggest anxiety you think you
I think the biggest anxiety I had was loss of productivity, like extra loss of productivity, in that I was worried the technology might be a little bit too laggy, that people's home setup might not be, I guess, at the baseline of what good latency would be.
had?
Just because when you're not in the office, everything there was expensive and built to be running consistently. Everyone's home setup when it comes to the internet, that can be a little bit dicey.
Hmm.
So I was worried about that, people being unable to work because of that situation.
So how much of that came true?
I'd say maybe 5% of it came true. Some people really did experience some very, very difficult lag on their home computers, and that had to do with just, I guess, how many people were on their internet line that would, I guess, kind of clog up the latency of it.
Yeah.
But so far now that we're, what, 9 months in? I've lost track of time. However
No,
far we
yeah,
are
that's another
now,
thing.
yeah, it seems to have kind of evened itself out. People have, um, found ways around it, or have moved or upped their internet packages to work out well with it. There's still some lag, that comes from just being remote in general, but for many of us, it's become almost negligible, if not similar to what it was like in the office. At the office, we were running off of a Teradici system anyway that was connected into Atlanta.
True.
So, we pretty much
That's
just took.
impressive.
It was very cool because it, for me, compared to other studios where we're running on a Teradici connected to a New York-based server room, it was pretty similar. Nothing beats, of course, like a regular wired computer, but as far as a Teradici system, it's been great. And we took our boxes home from our desk, put it on our home computer, and I found that it was not really that different at all.
So it's in a way. So you're talking. You guys were Teradiching into Atlanta with Craft. You were talking about, right?
Yes.
The So in a way, you guys are Crafty seems to already be kind of moving a little bit into this kind of like streamy, kind of remotey world. Um, do you think that any of that is going to stay now?
I think, yeah, I think a lot of it will stay. I think the future of this is probably going to be some sort of flexibility between working in the office and working at home. Don't quote me on that if that's what their real plan is. I mean, I'm going to say that that's unofficial. You can quote me on it, but unofficially, I think that's where it's going to go. It's certainly going to be what I would like, especially as a supervisor, being able to. I really enjoy the dynamic of the office. But I work late a lot, or sometimes things are just very difficult when it comes to quality of life when crunch time happens. So for someone like me, it'd be great to be able to get things done with the team in the office, and then come back home and continue to make sure that our product looks great, even if it takes us into the wee hours. Crafty was kind of, I think, it wasn't quite on purpose, but they were kind of poised to be ready for a moment like this, in that they had, just to cut down on some of the inherent expensive costs of New York City in general. They had kept everything remote to be able to, keep all the power and our IT team and everything under a secure database in Atlanta, where it's significantly cheaper. And that allowed us to move into almost any building within New York City that didn't have any limitations in terms of power. The only thing that we needed was an excellent internet line.
And I imagine it's like dedicated fiber or something like that.
Yeah, it's dedicated fiber, and I think they've built a fair amount of significant infrastructure within Atlanta and even within New York itself to get a great connection. So that's the biggest thing that I certainly miss. We were under expensive infrastructure then. Now it's just our own homes, which is all consumer level.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's well, you guys, you're definitely getting a big benefit out of the dedicated fiber because it is a two-way street, with that kind of stuff. Is there a specific project experience that you can share that was different because of COVID, specifically? I
You
know it's
mean,
like
that's fine. I guess in what way different other than now
so
we're at
like
our desks?
was there something that specifically when people were remoting in or working remotely, was there something that was like a specific scene or shot or something that was much worse or much better because it was remote? Or is there anything that do you feel like anything like that is?
I feel like it was usually the most creative shots. So I can't really describe, I guess, the nature of the work itself, but it was work that needed, I guess, heavy design and development with particles for an effect that's like totally new, right? That of course the clients want something they've never seen before. And just the process of trying to describe that amongst ourselves and spitball ideas and then keep iterating on it, I felt like it was a lot slower than had we been in person.
Have you guys considered like I know that some facilities will do they'll kind of create like a COVID safe event where people can come together and just collaborate on one specific thing. You guys ever do anything like that?
Like physically come together?
Physically come together, like people get tested. You have like the thermostat laser guns?
Yeah, we talked about trying to do that. I mean, work has kept us so busy that a lot of us haven't really
That's good.
left our desks as we would have in real life. But I guess real life we can always like go downstairs and go to a bar together. Um, we've talked about doing that, but it's a little dicey, I guess, because there could be liability with that.
Yeah.
We honestly just haven't quite got that far to try it. I think
No,
I'd like
it's
to
okay.
try though in the future, especially if the numbers hopefully remain low.
Yeah.
I guess the last month or two might have been the best time to do that. Had we been inspired to.
Speaking of that, how do you feel about like a second wave? If things
I
were to get worse, like how do you feel about it? Are you nervous at all? Because it sounds like you guys are kind of set up in a way where it shouldn't really cause too many problems.
It shouldn't and it might. So I am a
Mhm.
little bit worried about a second wave, only in that I'm also going on set right now for Manifest, and it's a show that shoots all over New York City, New York State, and New Jersey as well. And should a second wave come, it could potentially affect any of the locations that we're at. So perhaps if we manage to stay safe and aren't affected by somebody on the crew falling ill, there's still a matter of where can we shoot, and what happens if those locations get taken away because of any shutdowns that the city might do.
Mhm.
So that's a bit of a concern. For anything that we already have plates turned over for, I think we're good to go. And I'd be worried about a second wave just because of the state of our country and people getting hurt. But
Mhm.
if we have plates, we're good. The tricky part is getting footage. So I
Yeah.
think I know this show is one of the first to, I think, start being able to turn over things that we've shot during COVID, and that'll eventually run out if we have to shut down at all.
How was the speaking of on set? How's the experience changed? Is how
Now I'm spending what, maybe 10 to 16 hours plus in a mask almost all day. Things are definitely a little bit slower because everybody needs to wait for everyone to put on their PPE or advanced PPE when they're coming in close contact with our main talent who won't be wearing anything.
Mhm.
And there's certainly a slower ramp up time because people who are coming from out of state are quarantining for 2 weeks. Um, so it's a challenge. Uh,
Yeah.
Scheduling my own life is even a little bit more difficult because I have to keep constantly getting tested. So trying to find opportune moments to make sure I'm doing that in time to get results in time for the next day that I'll be on the crew
Yeah.
is an extra factor thrown into this.
What do they require? Is it daily testing or?
Depends on which pod you're in. So you've got the different levels of who gets close enough to those who are most at risk,
Mhm.
namely the people who aren't wearing any masks because they're performing. So I think I believe I'm part of the group that only has to test once a week, but others I believe are testing almost 4 times a week, or if not every day, I guess.
Mhm. Is this is just like a more detailed question? Is the testing provided by the production or?
Testing was provided by production. We're using their companies with their structure infrastructure for it.
Are those the swab tests or are they the whatever the more advanced one is? I don't even know exactly.
It's a combination of all of it. So, I
Yeah.
mean, if you're, not, I since I'm only going once a week, I have the swab tests, which is a little bit slower, but I believe a bit more accurate.
Mm-hmm.
And then they also have some of the rapid tests for when they need it. But I know supplies are also low, so they're monitoring who gets what, and I must say are doing a very very good job. I think of being very thorough, very safe, and very conscientious about all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty impressed and feel good about being out there with the crew.
Awesome. Very good. So this is kind of like I don't know how to formulate this question well. Like, how do you think this is going to change things going forward? Meaning that some of these things, I imagine eventually COVID will, once we have a vaccine, once a lot of things get figured out, things are going to slow down and are going to return to some kind of normalcy. When that is, we don't know. Um, what's going to stick around? Like, how is this going to change kind of the landscape broadly? Do you
I
think?
feel like this new culture of video chatting is going to stay with us for sure. I think remote meetings are going to be a more commonplace thing, as well as more flexibility between working from home and being in an office. What I'm not sure how to work out is what that mix will be like, at least for, say, a vendor with their team. You know, like right now, things I think work out perfectly because everyone is 100% remote. When you start having a mix of that, because things have to be so heavily scheduled when you do remote work, I think a new culture of what both worlds will be like will start to develop.
So you think like this hybrid cloud kind of, I mean, I don't know if it's even cloud, it's like hybrid remote local infrastructure with some cloud things. You think that's going to stick around?
I think so. I think companies will find that it's just cheaper and smarter to keep things kind of the way what Crafty was doing, because it is a cloud, isn't it? Just putting your server elsewhere
It is
remotely.
essentially, yeah.
It's the cloud.
You're just not leasing a data center by Google or Amazon somewhere. You're just doing your own.
Yeah. So I think scalability in that way is really going to stick, and people will take advantage of that heavily. I do think there will be some significant tax implications of all of this. So the biggest thing being, you know, in the tri-state area, right? People who live in New Jersey but always intended to work in New York. What's going to happen to that? And you know, during COVID too, it's still been an issue of our studio making sure that we're adhering to the New York tax credit. So folks that have moved away, their permanent address, if it's no longer in New York, that's been a bit of a juggle. You know, and I do think maybe everyone is kind of looking at those implications a little bit too lax, or at least artist-wise. You know, like everyone's very excited to be able to move away and you can just work from anywhere, but it's kind of not quite the case. It's a very nuanced issue that I think it would be prudent for everyone to kind of wait and see how the laws, how the politics, and how the studios respond to this.
That's actually what has been kind of the reaction to that that you've noticed. Because I am kind of curious about, because same thing. I've been thinking about the same thing, like how exactly does it play out? Because I guess before, if you lived in New Jersey, right, and you commuted to New York, that was fine because the work was done in New York. I guess the taxes were to New York City, all right? So
yeah.
but now it's that's not the case. So has there been any kind of reaction? Like, has there been somebody from New York State that sent a letter about this, or is it?
Well, that's the thing. I think everybody thought maybe this might have gotten sorted, that the pandemic might have been over a little sooner. So I'm not aware of any official letters that have gone around, although the newspapers have definitely been reporting, if you're paying attention, quite a bit of the tax implications that are going to happen and are already raising flags about this. There's so many different laws and rules depending on which state and how they cross over. New York State, I know, has a few special case scenarios for different states as well for this sort of thing, but it's not everywhere. And of course, not everyone is really reading up for it. I think there may be some very nasty and confusing moments once tax time comes around. You know, because I think also what people tend to overlook with, well, I'm still paying my income tax to New York City, right? So that's still fine. It's that all of these rebates and all of these tax rules were created so that people commute into New York City, use the transit lines, buy lunch in New York, walk the streets, go shopping there. Like they physically are demanding your presence there to spend money in the economy.
Yeah.
So
this is true. Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. I've been talking to some people that do the tax incentives in New Jersey, and there is I mean there's conversations about kind of collaborating with New Jersey in some way.
Yeah.
Because it also, I mean, before COVID, there was a lot of it made a lot of sense because you know it's two
the tri-state area acts like
the tri-state area
thing.
kind of is its own thing. It's a kind of a shared economy, so it makes a lot of sense to kind of coordinate the laws to be symbiotic. But yeah, we'll see. It's very new, and that's very true. That is a big problem that we're all gonna contend with soon enough. That's all the questions I have.
Oh, cool.
It's that simple, right?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sitting down, talking to me about this.
You're welcome.